has now been around for 3 seasons, and coaches everywhere are saving time and being more efficient when it comes to scout cards. Coach Robinson from Texas says, "The thing I most enjoy is the ease of access to all the scout cards and how I can draw on them if I need to make any changes. Every coach that uses it says that it is so great to use. If you and your staff are tired of the old ways of preparing and using scout cards, check out thecoachpad.com to start enjoying Scout Team and making the 2023 season better than ever."
Welcome to another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast. Today we have Coach George Harris with us. He is an assistant coach at Our Lady of Lourdes High School in the great state of New York. Coach, how you doing?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Appreciate you coming on. We're going to talk some double wing today because I kind of put that feelers out there because I've been looking at some stuff, and I had Coach Valatone, who wrote the toss, on, and I reread his book.
Yeah.
And I'm reading Hargett's not Wing T, but it's like Wings and Things offensive book, and Coach Murphy had some stuff in there. So I'm kind of just seeing what people know, seeing what people go into, but kind of, before we get started, how do you end up as an assistant coach at Our Lady of Lourdes High School?
Well, I have a son who's 15, and he's been in football since he was 6 years old, and I coached him all the way up through his youth experience, and then coming towards the end of that, one of the local coaches here was going to Lords as the JV coach. He was taking over for the eventual, to be the varsity coach, and asked me to join him over there as an assistant, and they'll make the progression to when he takes over. So I did one assistant year with him on JV, and then he went up with a couple other guys to varsity, and they put me on as the JV head coach. And getting involved with the double wing and stuff like that was because of him. I was more of a wing T fella, and based that in my youth offense. And then he taught me. It was Coach Sean Keenan taught me the double wing coming into it, and I took to it pretty quickly. And you know, I like all aspects of it, so you kind of like you dig in deep when you're going to be the head coach, and you have to be able to teach every position along the offensive line and all the skill positions. So, I dug pretty deep into it, man. I love it. It's old school, and it's fun to coach, and it's easy to coach, especially at our school. We don't get a lot of dudes coming in. We're a private Catholic school, but we're not allowed to recruit. We're not in a Catholic league, so we kind of gotta whoever comes there is who we get. And a lot of times, half my kids, if you got 18 freshmen coming in, like 12 of them never put a helmet on before. So, your work's cut out, but it's kind of like having that, having the double wing helps because the kids pick it up pretty quickly, you know?
I think that's a different perspective because obviously you're helping progress it so they get to the varsity level, and then like you kind of mentioned when we were messaging back and forth. Your head coach that kind of brought you on had 20 years of experience in the offense. So when you're talking about learning the offense, I want to start there. When he brought this, now how did he teach that offense to his staff? That's my first. I think that's the interesting point to start with, is how do you teach it to you guys before you took it to the kids?
Well, for him teaching me, like him and his guy, Jimmy Fettigan, had been together, like I said, for 20 years. We started with the offensive line. We were a Kalandi blocking style team, shoulder blocking, and it started with that good God methodology and teaching assignments for power. And then when you have power built, then you put in your counters as far as everybody's job responsibility. It's real simple. I mean, the you're probably familiar with the Kalandi method, where you call for, we number evens to the right, odds to the left. So it's 2, 4, 6, 8 to the right. Free back is the left wing back. So 34 powers are nuts and bolts, right? You can't run the double wing if you can't run power. And 4 hole is the tackle. He's good. So he has good is inside gap, on, outside gap, down. He goes through his progression. So the kid comes to line, and as whatever they line up in, like he's covered. You know what I mean? He knows what he's going to do. And us being a Catholic school, it's easy enough to tell a kid every good man who's good, the man towards the ball has God inside of him, right? So
Yeah.
gap on down for that fella, and then the center is always man on man away for power, which is each position's easy enough to teach, and then you just kind of like piece by piece put it in, as you go. The man outside the hole is the gap down backer, or the kingpin as we call him, and that's his responsibility, to gap down backer. So whatever, if he's facing a 6, a 5, or whatever it is, he knows what he has to do. And our wingback has FBI because he's always chasing the kingpin, so he's first backer inside, and that's the like nuts and bolts of it. And then from there, everything kind of feeds off power anyway, and you have your verbiage installed and everything else. I mean, you got wedge, which is it's
Yeah.
more like doing it is the only way you could teach wedge. You just can't
Yes.
the fouling. So we make some 300 references and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
try to visualize for them. But we have a pretty good system. I developed a PowerPoint for the kids based on that stuff, based on Calandy stuff, and then our verbiage and terminology. And it's like a 60 slide deal, which teaches the kids from it's like football 101 with the offense mixed into it. So it works out pretty good for us. We got some pretty smart kids. I mean, they test to get into the school. At least that's what they tell me. My kid's in it, so I mean, it can't be that hard to pass.
I mean, you also mentioned like you're going into year 4 with this, and we'll hit on some things, but what do you, I mean, I'll phrase it this way. What have you learned about the offense over the 3 years? Like how is not necessarily opinion, but your thought process with the offense, installing it, running it, evolved over the 3 years of being involved with the offense?
I think from an outsider's perspective, when you see this offense, you kind of look like, oh, this is Pee Wee. I mean, I know that a lot of people think that and they're frustrated with it. They don't. It's not a pretty offense. I don't know how many kids are listening at home, but it's the analogy is like she's not good looking, but she has other attributes that are desirable. What I learned was there's a rhythm to it, and you learn how to discreetly set things up. And if you can keep things looking as much the same as possible, then that's where the conflict is, because your different influences are just trying to you're only looking for a crease, man. And unlike today's society where they're looking for that instant gratification, that home run ball, like we're not playing home run baseball. We're more like the Yankees were in the mid 90s, where we're like, oh, we're going to nickel and dime you, and and grind you, and take our 3 yards and 3 yards and 4 yards, and then eventually you're going to step wrong, and that's when we're going to hit it big on you. It's just patience. We had a lot of drives this past year that were 16, 17 play drives, and it just really, especially on the JV level, it just sucks the will out of the teams you're playing against to constantly just get bludgeoned with these little body blows. And you run wedge and you get 8 yards. It's awful. You know what I mean? As a defender, there's like, what am I going to do? Especially as a junior varsity kid, or even on our varsity offense, ran the same deal, and it's just frustrating. You see the other teams just like, what the hell are we going to do? These guys are just running fullback up the middle, and they're not doing anything special, but they don't understand what we're actually doing. You know what I mean, with the wedge, and when it's run right, that it is almost impossible to stop for at least a 3 or 4 yard gain. I mean, unless you have dudes on the other side where you have their TNT, and they're big time dudes on in every gap, then there's nothing you can do with that if you're just physically outmanned. But that's the beauty of the offense. Like, you don't have to have dudes up front to run it. You know what I mean? And when you get new kids, it works out really well.
Now, I mean, well, yeah, I can't enunciate today. It's been a long day already. But like from when I'll go this direction first, since I can't enunciate properly for some reason right now. Is what defenses do you typically see at your level? Like, because I remember like when we ran the double wing, we saw initially a lot of like 5 fronts, odd fronts, that, I mean, borderline were 7 fronts at sometimes, and then as the season got along, we saw more 6 fronts, 4, 6 fronts. What do you guys kind of see, and how do people kind of try to attack you guys?
Well, most of the time we've seen teams open up with that 5-4-2, where they're gonna put their safeties on the outside shoulder of the tight ends, or on the wings at about 8-9 yards back, and play that way. And then they'll do the 5-man front. Sometimes they'll do a zero with basically a pair of ones and do like a TNT front, or they'll do a pair of twos with the nose covered, and then play a 6 on our defensive ends, and head up on our tight ends. And that's usually what we've seen. And teams will bump to a 6 where they they'll sit in every gap and then kind of have an overhang on the backside to wherever the boundary is, and then have their other side, in that outside gap, and that what will be their D. They'll stack it that way, and just kind of like, it doesn't really matter. I mean, that's what's good about those Kalandi rules, is that whatever they have, there's kind of an answer for it, and the kids have their own calls on top of that to adjust to where if they can't get there, or you kill one of the pullers, and because we pull two guys every play, and depending on who we're playing and what the film shows, we might go gate, which is the guard and the tight end, or we might just go guard tackle. And it also depends on what the refs are doing. If they don't like that Superman block from the tight end and they're calling a cut, then, or the chop block, then you got to kind of switch it up and have that installed to where you can pull a tight end instead, or just go solo and send the guard. But either way, you're creating that, where however you line up, we can still create more gaps than you can cover, especially when we bring the pullers along the way with the fullback and the quarterback when we're under center. He's also leading the way. So it's just a numbers deal, really. It's kind of hard to keep under 3 yards when you have that many gaps to cover and that many blockers to lead the way.
Are you guys still true foot to foot? Like I
Yep.
know some teams play with the spacing 6 inches, whatever, but are you guys are still full true foot to foot and
Yeah.
the line as far off as possible?
Yeah, we try to. I guess the best way to do it is for our kids when the center comes out, our guard will set up, and we want his hand to be even with the heel. That's his aim point, and so that creates that little pocket there. And our quarterback is basically foot to foot with the guard. Like that's how far back we get him until they tell us to, until they flag us, man. You want to be back as far as possible, because most teams are going to try to grab your pullers, or they're going to try to submarine them, bear crawl into them, and once the pullers get jammed up, that kind of makes it sticky on the front side. So if you can get them far back as possible without them tipping where they're going, that gives you the advantage, them being as far back and being pulled. Because we've had teams just grab the back of our jerseys of the guards and dare the officials to call a hold on them. And rarely do we get that call, but that's our job. We just mention it to the ref, like, hey, listen, we've seen this, we've seen that. Just keep an eye out for it, and you hope that they hope they're on their game that day.
Now, and you mentioned submariners there, and I always think it's interesting to ask people who run the double wing or even wing T offenses or triple offenses that get those. How do you deal with it? Because I think everybody's got a little bit different technique or different way they deal with it. How do you guys, from a base perspective, deal with the submariners who are just trying to take out your kneecaps?
Well, there's two ways to do that, right? There's play calling, where you got a lot of submariners. You can start doing your rocket, get your jet going, and that's going to slow that down a little bit, because it doesn't do them any good they're just creating a pile and slowing down their backside pursuit if they're doing that. Or, the kids, these kids figure out their own brand of justice sometimes, and, they might lean on a kid or land on them and let them know they don't dig that. I mean, if you take a helmet to your knee a couple times as an offensive player, you might accidentally step on someone's hand, or you might, fall on them or let them know that, that's dirty ball as far as I'm concerned. If you're cutting someone's legs out, we don't teach that as a defensive guy to be jumping across and trying to wipe knees out. That's not safe, and it's not fair. These are young kids, and even if they're in college, it's not the way to go about business. So, I mean, the kids they kind of have their own brand of justice in there, and that's kind of part of being a football player, is being tough and understanding what you're going to tolerate as a player. But we say something to the ref, I mean, they're not supposed to be doing that either, but it happens. The bear crawl, if it's done cleanly, then the kid's on the ground, he's neutralized. You just push his head into the ground and keep on moving. That's the best way to go about it. But if you're being held, or if he's tattooing your knees, unfortunately that does happen. But the kids, they'll come to the sideline and say, hey, coach, they're hitting my knees, or they're just diving at my legs, or trying to hurt me, or they grab my ankle or twisting. And to stop a puller, I would hope it doesn't happen, but we've seen it. And you just got to deal with it. You got to get them off you. And mostly you can just save your kids from getting in trouble and start running a little more jet and go about it that way. The submarine too stops wedge. I mean, they try to do that.
Yeah.
That's just it's hard to push the pile then, but I mean, you just bump one out, you can run dog after that, and collapse that kid down. There's a big wide hole open there. So cause and effect, right? Every action has an opposite reaction. So you just kind of feel your way through it as a play caller, as a coach.
Now, a double-ended question here is, what percentage of your varsity offense do you get in? And then with that, what is your typical install schedule kind of look like?
Well, so our varsity coach we went to a clinic out in Boston last year, one of the Glazer clinics, and he's a big fan of this fellow who's always promoting the wing tee. So he kind of wanted to like sprinkle that in this year, and I said, well, as a JV guy, I don't really want to do that per se. We're a double wing team, so if I could stick with the base double wing, and we put gun wing in because it was the same blocking. It was just, it looked a little different, and the spacing was a little different on the line, but for the most part, it was the same stuff. So he let us just do gun wing and under center double wing, which is the base of it. So it said like our under center was our wife, and gun wing, which I got mostly from the Tim Murphy stuff, is our mistress. So we install it the same way as a varsity. And in fact, when we start camp, we're all together to make sure that we're all using the same lingo and implementing the offense in the same fashion with our ND time and team time and stuff like that. And we'll rotate too. So as long as there's no equipment, we're allowed to commingle the kids, and it helps too because the older kids help teach the younger kids.
So you start with power. What are your next plays you go into?
Oh,
after? Yes.
Power, counter, and the rules for counter are very simple variation off of power. Wedge is installed very early on, and then we'll decide based on personnel. At least I did on JV. Are we a rocket sweep team? Do we have the athletes? Do we have that guard that can get out there, or how are we gonna variate from installing sweep or rocket based on who we have offensively to kind of get out in front? What's going to suit our personnel better. But by the time we get to sweep in that, we already have an idea, on who's going to be, like the dude is always the guard. Your dude lineman who's the best athlete, he probably would be a good tight end, or a fullback. He's your guard, and he's probably your best athlete, in the under center stuff.
Now with that is with bringing in the shotgun stuff. For first, like I mean, you mentioned a little bit of it is because of the wing T stuff, but why bring in the gun aspect of it? I mean, because Tim Murphy's stuff is not hugely different than the other center stuff. I mean, obviously it allows you to run the Trojan sweep, which is a little different. But like why bring in the gun stuff when you already have the under center stuff?
Well, it's also optics, right? I mean, like I said, she's not very good looking, and the gun wing stuff almost tricks the people who are watching into thinking they're watching some sort of zone read, look to it, when it's really just it's still double wing. Plus, we knew we were going to have a kid this year who was an exceptional athlete and could throw the ball. So, for a double wing team, especially a JV one, to throw 12 to 15 times a game was a lot. So we wanted to be able to utilize him, and we didn't have a real dynamic athlete playing fullback. So that's also a variation. The gun kind of de-emphasizes him as a ball carrier, but we still wanted to keep the under center stuff to use wedge and the power aspect of it. And it just gave defenses more of a look to defend. And we had a good jet package more so out of gun wing than we did for under center.
Okay.
So it's sexier, basically.
I get it. I get it. Now with that is, I mean, is there any like obviously there's some things you can do a little bit better pass game wise and seeing stuff, but is there any other adjustments that you personally had to make for your kids from going from the under center to the gun stuff? Obviously, some of the footwork stuff's a little different for your running back because it's positioning and all that.
Right.
But is there any other adjustments that you guys had to make from when you went from the under center stuff to the gun stuff?
Yeah, I found that our wide powers or even the powers worked better under center, and it was because we couldn't figure out the time. We were getting chased down on the backside of it quite a bit. Where when we're under center, it seemed like that guy was just barely missing our guy when he's turning it up, and maybe because it's such a short area, but between the snap and the timing of it, and him coming across because he's stacked on the tackle, we found that a lot of the times, like it held the backside defender, the backside linebacker, but he was never going to make that play anyway. But the defensive end would kind of come down hard. So we had to kind of figure out a better way, blocking wise, and sacrifice a few things under gun to get power going, that way. And a lot of it was showing him a few pulls, you know what I mean, and letting him keep it, let the quarterback keep it, even if he just had a call from the sideline where you see they're cheating, and you just give them like a little, a signal from the sideline to, hey, it's okay if you pull this thing and take it. But that was the adjustment, was getting, like, we ran under center power 36 and 34 no problem, but sometimes when we try to go gun, that defensive end seemed to, like, it's only like this close, you know what I mean, of timing, and he was getting there. So we had to, like, maybe not Superman, or figure something else out where we went gate instead, where the tight end went, and then tackle would kind of hinge back and just get a little piece of them to slow it down. But I mean, that was all trial and error, because my guy, who had run this double wing for a couple decades, finally acquiesced to let us go gun, and once we did, he was like, "Wow, I wish I would have done this, years ago," just to have that little extra, little change to it, you know.
I get it. Like, I mean, obviously Tim Murphy's had a lot of success with it. I know some other schools did, and we saw a team this year that ran it. I mean, going forward, are you probably looking to run more of the gun stuff or the under center stuff?
I'm gonna stick to what we did this year, and a lot of it, when you're, because we have a good, our league, which is Section 9, has a good film pool even for JV, and now we'll see how teams defend us. And some teams struggled with us being under center, so that maybe they'll see it more, and it'll be more of an ebb and flow kind of thing. But I plan on keeping both of them, and it'll also be personnel dependent. Like right now, I don't know who my quarterback's going to be. So if I have a quarterback who's not a dynamic athlete, then we might go 90% under center, and let him be, more of a lead blocker, and instead of a ball carrier and a ball handler. It kind of depends on what you got. I know I have three good running backs coming back that were freshmen last year that will, if we can go under center and not miss a beat, you know, kind of depends on, it's all personnel dependent. Got a good tight end who's a dude and you want to give him the ball, then, and we got a kid who could chuck a little bit, then, you know, it will probably be in the gun a little bit more, even though we had big plays out of the under center passing stuff too. It just, I mean, it's just the nature of the offense. You sit there and you're getting bludgeoned and bludgeoned, and those safeties are creeping up, and they're worried about power. And next thing you know, the tight end's 6 yards behind you, and you just over the top, or you hit him with a bullet and he's gone. It's a pain in the ass. I'm glad I don't have to defend it, other than practice.
And then the last question I got for you, Coach, is do you have any tips or suggestions? I always like asking this question for people trying to add the offense or install the offense for the first time, whether it be the under center or the gun stuff. Do you have any tips, suggestions, pointers, anything to kind of help people out?
Yeah, don't dabble. If you're going to do it, be all in and commit to it. I know a lot of teams, a lot of schools they'll want to just flirt with it, and maybe we'll do a goal line package, and well, this doesn't work. You know what I mean? They don't commit to it. But if you commit to it, because it really is a mindset and a culture. It's a whole different ball game to run this offense. So if you're going to go double wing, make sure there's a lot of people out there who can help you. Go get some clinics, get the Tim Murphy stuff, read up as much as you can, get some different flavors and inputs, because that's what I did as a coach. It wasn't just what Coach Keenan gave me when I got here was, well, what else can I learn about this offense? Read the toss, go over Tim Murphy stuff, get into the Calandy stuff, and talk to other coaches about it. But it's about commitment. You know what I mean? Just like the game itself, man. If you're not all in, and you're gonna like half-ass it, then you're gonna get out what you put in. But the offense is great, and don't get discouraged by not having the prettiest girl at the dance. You know what I mean? Because this offense can boogie all night long.
All right, Coach. Well, thank you for coming on. Coaches, make sure you like, share, subscribe, all that lovely jazz. Check out our sponsor, Coachpad. And then that is another episode of the Gap Down Backer podcast.